Hello and welcome. It's summer in Srinagar and tourists are coming into Jammu and Kashmir by the droves. They've touched 500,000 we hear already, and there are at least 2 more months before this season comes to an end. So does that mean that the torrid summer of 2010, which saw more than 100 people die when security forces confronted stone pelting protesters firmly in the past, is the calm that we see and read about here to stay? And how has it been achieved? Let's ask the man who's been entrusted with running or governing one of the most politically sensitive and complex states in India, the Chief Minister of Jammu and Kashmir, Omar Abdullah. In the past 3.5 years as Chief Minister, I must say he's seen more than his fair share of challenges. Omar Abdullah, it's good to have you on the show.
Pleasure.
Fantastic tourist numbers, isn't it?
It's reassuring, but it's not something that we talk about very much. For the simple reason that in the past we made the mistake of correlating tourism arrivals with normalcy, as a result of which we automatically make tourists into targets for those people who want to convey that things are not normal in Jammu and Kashmir. And therefore very in a calculated manner, we have made sure that people understand that tourism is essentially an economic activity and not a barometer of normalcy.
I haven't heard you react to what the Jamaat-e-Islami just put out last week about the fact that tourists should, dress with certain decorum and almost like an advisory.
Well, the reason why we chose not to say anything is because we wanted to see how this played out. And no sooner had the statement been issued that Jamaat-e-Islami then came forward with its own clarification that I think put the matter to rest. I could have reacted, but I think it would have...
I quickly went onto Twitter to check if you said something.
Sometimes, as I said, I think in response to somebody I said that sometimes the best response is to not respond at all. Which I think in this case was the best thing to do, because it's a matter that sorted itself out. I dare say if I had got into some sort of a verbal duel with the Jamaat-e-Islami, perhaps it wouldn't have had the conclusion that it did.
In fact, that statement issued by the Jamaat-e-Islami made it to the front pages of some newspapers in Mumbai, for instance. And when you read it, you realize that is it as big as it seems to be because of the positioning?
It's bigger outside the state.
It is bigger outside the state.
It definitely was a bigger issue on the front pages of newspapers that look for bad news to come out of Jammu and Kashmir. I doubt very much whether the retraction or the clarification issued by the Jamaat-e-Islami will receive quite the play on those very same newspapers, which is part of what sort of gets my goat with regard to this state. I mean, you're very happy to put these sort of stories that show us in bad light on a box in the on the front page. But the moment there's some sort of clarification or something gets cleared up, or it's not as bad as it's made out to be, then it disappears. Case in point being the recent tragedy that we had with the burning of the shrine.
The Dastagir shrine.
We had a certain amount of tension. Nobody bothered to put it into perspective. I mean, you had the stray incidents of stone pelting in a handful of police stations in downtown Srinagar. But thanks to some TV channels, you got the impression that the entire valley was either up in flames or damn near close to it. Now these sort of things are dangerous. They cause us a huge setback.
But this shrine is a Sufi shrine. It's a shrine where people of all religions go. The fact that it was burnt down, and I know there is an investigation that has been asked for, isn't it? Is that worrying? Because I know that when you sit far away from Jammu and Kashmir, you tend to look at these things that seem worrying and put two and two together and start asking questions about whether everything is all right or not.
If it is established that the fire that took place in Dastagir Sahib was not accidental and was deliberate, and then it is established that there was a sectarian motive behind it, then yes, it would be worrying. But it's not my place to jump to conclusions, and in fact would be dangerous for me to do that. And therefore, until the facts are established, I must keep an open mind, but at the same time ensure that we don't have similar tragic incidents in other shrines, because we are essentially a land of Sufi saints and shrines. I mean, the Islam that we practice, the overwhelming majority of people are firm believers in shrines, even though there are some amongst us who would like to alter that. But so far, they haven't succeeded. And therefore, it is a major part of my responsibility
To ensure that these are
these sort of
protected.
incidents do not occur.
You began by sounding a cautious note about the numbers of tourists coming into Jammu and Kashmir and quickly making these connections about, in quotes, normalcy in the valley and in the state, therefore. I'm going to quote something you said almost immediately after June 2010. And you said one clear lesson is that we cannot afford to be lulled by a sense of complacency that there is no issue in Kashmir requiring resolution. While things may appear calm, if you scratch the surface, there are varied levels of anger and resentment. Is this something that's applicable to this state at any given time?
Clearly the levels of anger are not what they were then. Given clear evidence to point that whenever people have tried to exploit situations that have arisen after that, they haven't succeeded. But if we were to lull ourselves into a sense of complacency that there isn't an issue that requires resolution, then that would be dangerous. And that's why I continuously make this point that it is important for the government of India to engage the state of Jammu and Kashmir at various levels, not just the fact that I meet the Prime Minister or other ministers, or that there is some sort of official channel of communication. It's very important that we continue the process of engagement as had taken place with the interlocutors, and then take those results forward.
What are some of the things or the outcomes that you've read in that report that you think maybe would result in the engagement?
I really do not want to take that report apart and do a sort of critical analysis of it, either in the media or through various TV channels.
Right.
There are parts in that report that I agree with.
And
there are
some
parts
you
that I
don't.
disagree with.
Fair
now,
enough.
Similarly for my party, I know for a fact that the party I belong to will accept some of the recommendations, but will have serious reservations about other parts of them. Now, there are those who have completely rejected the report. But the fact of the matter is that this was a report created after an extensive exercise of consultation across all the districts of the state, stretching from Jammu to Kashmir to Ladakh.
And over a year.
And therefore, for more than a year, talking to thousands of people. And therefore, I think it requires to be taken to the next logical step, which is that it requires some sort of discussion process, so that we can then look at what are those recommendations that are immediately applicable, which are those that perhaps with a certain amount of work can be put into place, and which are those that will be outright rejected or not taken forward. That's what is required to be done.
But that discussion is not happening, is it? Because we
Well, I
don't
think
seem
we
to
need
be hearing
I think we
it.
also need to understand that whether we like it or not, Jammu and Kashmir is not the only issue that the government of India has to face. God knows they've got their hands full at the moment with various other issues. The only thing I hope is that it doesn't get put on the back burner to the extent that everybody forgets that this report ever existed.
In the past two years, there has been no, we haven't seen what we saw in the summer of 2010. How has this calm been created? What would you attribute this to? What do you think has worked in the past 2 years?
One can't deny a certain amount of agitational fatigue which had crept in.
Because there was no one trigger for that 2010.
No, there was.
There was.
I mean,
because in some of your interviews...
It can be clearly linked to the fake encounter in Matsil, where innocent people were killed and then projected as terrorists, and really very little follow-up action was taken to bring the guilty to book. I mean, we're still fighting the Pathribal case, which took place many years before that. Matsil is more recent. So that was clearly the reason
trigger for the summer of 2010.
That was the trigger for the underlying anger. The actual bursting out of this took place because of the death of one boy as a result of a stray tear gas shell. But even that sort of protest was the result of a call of protests given because of what happened in Matsil. So there are triggers. I mean, for 2008, 2009, 2010, there are triggers. And therefore, since then, our effort has been to either provide no trigger at all, or where we feel that an incident can be used as a trigger, then handle it very, very carefully and make sure that small things don't add up to become one huge problem. And that's what we've been doing. And therefore, I believe our political response, our administrative response, our security response has been far better than it has done in the past.
You know, talking about Patribal and Matsil, you know, we know for a fact that you have a very good relationship with, you know, the UPA's senior most leaders, and there's great equity that you have with them, and they have, you know, clear affection and respect for you and your abilities. But would it be fair to say that people in the state don't feel that you're leveraging that enough, maybe, to get resolution in these issues?
We've got a lot done. We have got a lot done. But the fact is that there is resistance within the system that is difficult to overcome. The resistance to deliver justice on the Patribal matter. It's only, in spite of the best efforts of Government of India, it's only the Supreme Court that was able to bring the army to a position where they accepted that they would court-martial these soldiers. One expects a similar decision in the case of the Matsil incident. But it's not as if we haven't been able to get things from Government of India that weren't happening in the past. A policy to bring back those Kashmiris who went across for training but don't want to come back with guns didn't happen before this government came into being. It's only because of efforts with the Government of India that we were able to, and the very strong support I received from the Home Minister. The fact that we're even in a position to talk about the Armed Forces Special Powers Act. Sure, I accept we haven't been able to reach.
Since October last year, you've been on this campaign,
and I will continue to
have
be on
this
this
gradual
I will continue to be on
from
this
some
campaign.
areas. October to June 2012, you made a concerted effort to ask for the Armed Forces Special Powers Act to be gradually and partially revoked. There's nothing on it, isn't it? There's nothing that's happened.
Well, I won't say there's nothing. Yes, we haven't reached where I had expected to and where I'd hoped we'd reach some time ago. Part of it is on account of just sheer bloody-minded cussedness on the part of the odd individual. No, I won't even say the institution. Honestly, on account of the odd individual. And part of it is perhaps the fact that, I mean, I'm arguing from a point of logic. My argument is being countered with more of an emotional argument than a logical one. It's very difficult to counter logic with emotion or vice versa. But I'll keep chipping away and hopefully we'll get somewhere.
That's one, and the other thing is the security footprint, isn't it? Bringing down the presence, especially in smaller villages. That's again something we've been able to do. Again, being able to leverage the sort of support we've got from the Government of India to have been able to dismantle 40 bunkers in Srinagar, including Lal Chowk, is not something that people would have imagined possible even in 2010. But it's happened. We've had the odd stray militant incident after that, but it's not as if suddenly Srinagar is awash with militants and the whole process of normalization has gone backwards. Similar is the case with the reduction of the footprint of the security forces. The only problem is that we're taking the meat out of the middle of the sandwich. I mean, we are looking at reduction of security forces by taking the CRPF out. Now, I have difficulties with that because I believe if you have to reduce the footprint of the security forces, you need to start with the army. You need to move the army and the Rashtra Rifles out from the hinterland and position them on the line of control, which is where they're supposed to be, making sure that no infiltration takes place. If infiltration stops completely, militancy in Jammu and Kashmir will dry up. It's as simple as that. So you're going to keep chipping away?
That's what I have to do.
Over the past few years, and I've seen a lot of press conferences you've done, a lot of things that you've been saying as Chief Minister, and logic seems to be the overriding approach. Okay, and that has been used as a criticism against you, isn't it? That you don't have the human, or you didn't famously have the human touch in the summer of 2010, and it's logic
I would not deny that.
Dry, a dry approach.
Well, it wasn't so much a dry approach. I could have and should have been more visible.
Why weren't you?
I should have reached out to people more.
Why weren't you?
I think I was just
overtaken
really
by
badly affected by what was happening around me. Not easy to govern under those circumstances. But then such is life. You learn lessons and you implement them.
You know, you were in Parliament for several years before 2008, which was for us a milestone, the Omar Abdullah milestone moment, isn't it? I know you
might as well have been invisible up until then.
No, I don't think. I don't think that's what I mean. But I think that, you know, everybody has that moment where they sort of come into sharp focus, and that famous "I'm a Muslim and I'm an Indian and I see no distinction between the two," that 3-minute speech, I still see it today and feel very moved. There was a great deal of passion then, and there was a great deal of conviction. In 2012, after your experience in governing Jammu and Kashmir, where you're faced with hard realities, with real politics and all of that, do you still have that kind of passion and emotional conviction?
Under the same circumstances, with the same sort of feelings that I had, I would still make the same speech. I still have the same feelings.
I don't mean what you said then. But
no, the emotions are the same.
The approach to, you know, you sounded like a person who cared, things mattered,
I haven't stopped caring.
Therefore things could get done.
The day I've stopped caring is the day I'll walk away from here and not look back again. Electoral politics for me is about continuing to care and caring enough to want to deliver. I mean, obviously over time, with age, one becomes perhaps just a little bit more jaded, a little bit more cynical. But I'm not pessimistic. I still retain an essence of optimism that tomorrow will be a better day, and we need to work towards that better tomorrow. My manner of doing things may not please everybody. I may not be the most gregarious, outgoing, plunge into the crowd sort of person, but I'd like to get the job done, and then I'll leave it to people as to whether that's something they appreciate or not.
And yet for someone who's not a plunge into the crowd kind of person, you're very Twitter happy, aren't you?
Well,
like some people would be trigger happy. It's almost like that, isn't it?
Not really. Because I mean, I see people who are a lot more prolific on Twitter.
Because, you know, it creates a sense of intimacy. We haven't met, and especially not in a conversation like this, and yet thanks to your tweets, which the media now faithfully reports,
that does happen.
There is a sense that, okay, I know how this guy thinks, you know, not the Chief Minister of Jammu and Kashmir, but this guy thinks.
That also happens. I mean,
is that good
whether it's
or
a good thing or a bad thing, I don't know. I mean, I tend to find that people would talk to me in a manner in which I don't think they would talk to any other Chief Minister. I can't imagine Madam Jayalalitha or Narendra Modi ji or Nitish Kumar or anybody being spoken to the way some people talk to me on Twitter. But I guess that's the whole sort of social media thing. Barriers tend to break down.
It's also the age. But what I'm curious about is that is me in Mumbai reacting to your tweets. That is journalists picking up what you're saying to also being able to quote you instead of always reaching out for a quote. How is Jammu and Kashmir? How are your constituents? How are the people in this state reacting to your accessibility? And how prevalent are they on?
It's not a big deal.
Yeah.
It is not a big deal.
But are the young people here?
If you were to kid yourself into believing that just because you're on Twitter, then suddenly you're accessible, it's not true. I mean, more often than not, I mean, I'm sorry to have to say this, but most of the people from Kashmir that end up on my Twitter timeline are people who would probably hang me from the nearest tree they could find. They hate me, they hate my politics, they hate the family that I belong to, and therefore spare no opportunity to pull me down. That again is one of the advantages of social media. They have that advantage of distance and more often than not anonymity to be able to take those shots at me, and one rolls with the punches. Twitter is not a substitute for actual people-to-people contact. It cannot be.
While the root of the problem here is a political one, you have made a lot of effort in bringing about, or trying to bring about development, provide people with occupation, young people especially. How is that working? Even though we understand that Kashmir's problems are not about giving the state money and helping people, become prosperous.
Look, you can't buy your way out of this problem. If you could, we would have done it a long time ago. I mean, the root of this problem lies in its politics. It lies in the way in which successive state governments were treated, whether it was 53, 77, 84, 89, 90. I mean, one can roll out dates and incidents, but the root of this problem lies in its politics. That having been said, there is an economic component to it as well. I mean, the fact is that suboptimally educated youngsters from poor backgrounds with perhaps a dismal view of what their future will entail are more prone to militancy or law and order sort of disturbances than those who see a brighter future for themselves. And therefore, we have been trying to work on skill upgradation, on converting what are essentially unemployable youngsters into an employable workforce. Also trying to create as many government jobs as possible, because unfortunately, as much as we might like to believe the private sector is committed, it isn't. At the end of the day, they don't run charitable organizations. They look at the bottom line. And if the bottom line out of operating in Jammu and Kashmir doesn't make economic sense to them, they're not going to come here.
But have you tried?
Sure, one has tried in the beginning. One did the whole round of the whole
all
chambers,
the industry,
all the
industry
chambers and all
chambers.
the other stuff. But I soon gave up because they produce really nice reports and give you great suggestions. But beyond that, it really doesn't go very far.
Is it the feeling of
It's
insecurity?
It's the perception of Jammu and Kashmir being an unsafe place to do business. Plus, I mean, you leave aside the perception. The fact is we have locational disadvantages.
exactly.
We are at the fag end of the country. More often than not, you'll have to bring in your raw material just to finish the product and take it out. So it's not like we're either rich in raw materials. We're not Chhattisgarh or Jharkhand or states like that. Nor do we have a huge domestic market. So we're not exactly best placed to set up a large manufacturing base. But there are industries that we have an inherent competitive advantage for. We haven't yet been able to exploit that advantage, but if we have a few more summers like this one, then perhaps we will be able to.
How do you think the rest of India sees Kashmir and Jammu and Kashmir? And I don't mean Delhi. I don't mean the politicians and the political class or the political journalists.
It's like asking, how does Jammu and Kashmir see the rest of India?
Yeah, how, where, what?
Well, there is no one answer to that. You stop a man on the street, you'll get very different answers from very different people. Again, divided sometimes regionally, sometimes otherwise. Similar is the case. I mean, how you perceive Jammu and Kashmir largely, first and foremost, depends upon how far from Jammu and Kashmir you actually are. So the further south you go, the more disconnected you are from Jammu and Kashmir.
Shouldn't bridges be built? Should we just look at Kashmir as a place to come and spend 5 days in, spend some money and go away?
Honestly, even that's good enough for me.
And should we look at Kashmir when there's trouble and then we watch it and then how?
Well, just remain connected, for good or for bad.
How does one remain connected? What can be done between people to be connected?
That has to come from within. I mean, there are those who feel a deep connection with the place. There are those who believe it's a complete waste of money. And the sooner government of India got rid of Kashmir, the better it would be. I mean, again, there's so many different opinions about what needs to be done with Jammu and Kashmir and how it should be handled. It's not, I mean, how does one tell you how to maintain a connection or to maintain a bridge? For some of us, just the fact that you come here, spend a few days in summer, leave a little bit of your hard-earned money behind and go back is great. It establishes a connection with us. Treat us with less suspicion when we come to other parts of the country. It doesn't help when students from Jammu and Kashmir get beaten up in colleges in Haryana or in Madhya Pradesh or places like that. It doesn't help when students...
But those are surely stray incidents.
But they have an effect on the psyche of people here. See, I mean, it doesn't help when people come back from Bombay saying that they haven't been able to find accommodation, that they were almost about to seal a paying guest accommodation until the person heard that they're from Kashmir, and then suddenly said, no, sorry, we're not interested. See, so, I mean, these sort of things do then, they rankle.
Omar Abdullah, we wish you all the best. Thank you for your time.
Pleasure.
Thank you.